Good afternoon. Welcome to a Disaster Central election special. My name is David Vela here in Houston, Texas, as we begin day one of our election night coverage with a debate amongst voters. Obviously, election day is coming soon, tomorrow, obviously, and we felt here at Disaster Central that in order to support the idea of, or just to embrace a conversation, we would have this debate and this just general discussion. Obviously, the participants aren't here yet, and I doubt they will be here for a bit. But I'm gonna let you know on what the topics will be about. The topics for the following debate will include the future of America, elections, the the strengths and weaknesses of each candidate, and how and why a voter would vote for their respective candidate. Obviously, with the folks not being here yet, we do want to introduce to you our new setup for election coverages. Hopefully you're liking the bottom bar with the special report, America Decides, live coverage all day on Tuesday, as well as our new headlines. Obviously, we're still waiting for people to trickle in, so it will take a minute. Sorry, I'm getting sick too. Ignoring that. And yeah, also, we will be keeping a track of what the viewers will ask during these questions, so then we could ask the questions towards the actual voters themselves. So don't be afraid to ask a question for these people to answer below. But without further ado, while we wait for these people, we will begin actually discussing the actual facts about this election. So, I think this has been a very interesting election for sure. Quite a historic one, quite a crazy one, and quite a historical one on practically every single standard of the measure, at least in modern American politics. Probably the craziest election we probably have had was 1860. And obviously we won't reach those points, but in the modern sense, in the 21st and the 20th century, this is probably the most pivotal election in American history. This is probably the most important election in American history, and obviously talking about how many people are voting early. There's been an estimate around 75 million people have voted early. That is huge. That is historical record number amounts of people voting. By the way, if you're watching this and you are registered to vote, and if you haven't voted yet, for no matter what candidate, no matter the candidate, you have that right to exercise. If you want to have a voice, you have to vote. So, without further ado, let's read some comments. Binget says, exciting day tomorrow for sure. Yeah, it is going to be a pretty exciting day. Our voters still trickling in. Do not be afraid to ask your questions for these voters. We will have a segment for that in the coming days or in the coming hour. So this whole idea will be scheduled into 5 questions, and will remain the last 30 minutes specifically for viewers to ask a question. Fortunately, as things continue to progress, these questions will begin to get harder and harder, but here we go. There we go. We have our first Um, we have our first person trickling in, Ludacris, also known as Groudon. Um, Good afternoon or good morning.
And it's good afternoon here in Australia. So, what's up?
Yeah, no, we're just talking about how the setup for this debate will go. Um, I wouldn't really call this a debate. I would call this more of a discussion, just
Yeah, this.
amongst potential voters and how people. This is actually a really great opportunity for a foreigner to offer insight on how they feel about this election. So, we'll start off with the question with you. So, Groudon, obviously, this has been a momentous election cycle. Uh, it has been one of the crazier election cycles we have. Uh, I just want to ask you to introduce yourself, um, what you think about this election, and how do you feel this election will go, and why this election is so important.
Okay, so I'm Groudon. I am from Australia, and from what do I think about this election? I feel like what has happened from this election. I feel like a lot of things have changed ever since the first debate, in which basically tanked Biden's campaign, re-election campaign, and then after that there was the first assassination attempt, and then there was the and then right after was the RNC conference, and then after that was a replacement of replacement of the candidate with Kamala Harris now being the presumptive nominee, which then she won. Then came the debates, which effectively made this race closer than we expected. Then led to the which then led to another assassination attempt, and then yet the polls still remain close for no goddamn reason. Um, how I feel about and then now and then it's like 12 hours before polls close or polls open in US.
So polls will open at around in about 12 hours, and they will close in about exactly 23 hours from now.
Okay. So what I feel about this, how I feel about this election, I feel like I'm going from a gut feeling. I feel like the polls have been really off this season. I feel like there's been a momentum shift in rural areas or like areas that have been underpolled. Like there's been an Ansel poll which basically shocked me and shocked the entire political US politics with that shocking Harris lead. I feel like Harris I feel like Harris is basically being underpolled, and let's wait till election night, but I feel like I would rather be in Harris's camp than in Trump's camp as of right now. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess practically what you're saying is, um, now especially with that shocking poll that came out of Iowa, Harris with a 3 point march, a 3 point lead there, and I think this was one of the more accurate pollsters as well, for 2020 and 2016 in Iowa. So
Mm-hmm.
that is, I think you do have a point when it comes to a potential Harris momentum. I do just want to quickly point out, uh, according to the Real Atlas polls, so there's a real talk, clear politics polls. It pretty much takes all the polls and pretty much puts them into a margin. Right now, as we speak, it is deadlocked. NBC News has a poll right now that has Trump and Kamala deadlocked. CBS has a poll where Kamala is up by one. However, As history, as 2016 has proven,
Hmm.
most polls tend to underestimate Republicans by around 3 points.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I
again,
feel like
so
I
again,
feel
I mean, and this is where I'll come in, and I apologize for interrupting this, but uh, I feel like, and I'll say this right now to the viewers: if anybody tells you that they know what is going to happen this election cycle, they are lying to you.
They're wrong.
This
They
election
do not
cycle will
know.
be one of the closest, potentially the most dramatic election since 2000, partly because of one state, that one state that has been on everyone's mind. Every single pollster
Pennsylvania.
every single pollster, every single candidate that is running for office, either there or um, in the president cycle, has been pushing at Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is the tipping point. If Pennsylvania wins, if Democrats win Pennsylvania, Kamala will automatically win this election. I mean, there's no other way of saying it. If Pennsylvania goes red, then Trump has now opened up a huge area of opportunities for him to win this election on the electoral count. We're also joined here by Roman. Roman, obviously, he can't vote,
Hello.
but he is from El Paso, which is a border town in the state of Texas, border city in the state of Texas. Um, uh, Same for you. Introduce yourself. How do you feel about this election cycle? What do you think this election cycle is going to end like, and why this election cycle is important to you? Go ahead.
Well, obviously, this election cycle is super important for obviously many reasons. Like, there's obviously so many tensions right now within the American people, especially because the internet right now is pumping out a lot of what Felix likes to say hopium. So this will get people riled up for this election, pumped up for uh, whoever you're voting for and stuff. But whoever wins, it's gonna be bad. That's what I think. For rioting reasons, obviously, there's going to be protests. There's going to be riots. There's going to be a lot of crap that comes out of this. Sorry, pardon my language. But
Hold on. Sorry to interrupt. Joel, to answer your question, these people have been chosen prior to the actual election, or prior to the actual filming of the video. So these people have been elected prior to, I guess, in a way, debate. So you can't really join live. Um, but again, viewers, we do have if this part of this video, part of this live stream, I will be asking the folks questions that you do ask, the viewers. The viewers, you have an opportunity to listen to each person, each voter's opinions if you ask your question. So just keep in mind of that. Go ahead.
but yeah, other than that, I really don't have much else to say other than that. Yeah, this is gonna be historic.
yeah, and it's gonna affect how the international community will respond to it. Because right now here in Australia, we have an AUKUS agreement with the United States and the United Kingdom. We don't know what will happen to it because we effectively basically, how should I say this? We basically screwed the former, how should I say, the previous Australian government screwed over France to sign a deal with the United States and Kingdom to create nuclear powered submarines. And with an election coming up, we don't know how the Republicans will respond to it. I have seen like Vivek Ramaswamy saying that he will support this, but I have not heard anything from Donald Trump as well. So that's just a area of concern for this outcome of election is whether a Trump presidency will maintain the allies and the global alliances, or will he go America first again and effectively leave us to fight for our own in a sense of way.
Yeah, I think this is where a lot of foreign politics does come into play. Trump and most of the modern day GOP, uh, I wouldn't necessarily say it's self isolationism, but they they tend to lean towards wanting to focus on themselves first, which I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. But the problem is when you create massive alliances and with the threats that we're facing today, China and Taiwan, North Korea. Now, North Korea isn't as big of a threat as they were in 2018, 2019, 2017. However, they're still a threat. Um, at any moment, North Korea can launch an invasion into South Korea and they could reignite that war. With the threats that we're facing today, and my first question will go to both panelists that are on right now. With the threats facing today, how does their candidate of choice, whether you prefer Kamala or whether you prefer Trump, how does how does your candidate or how would your candidate be able to um, I guess maintain foreign policy while also attempting to work on bettering the lives of Americans? I will leave it to Groudon to go first.
I feel like international policies and domestic policies can work intertwined. Like by opening up trade to America with like Europe countries in Asia, in Europe. You can basically, how should I say this? Create competition within America, which will lower prices. However, I feel like the investment in America, which the Biden Harris administration have attempted and or is attempting to do in Midwest America, does create a lot of jobs as well. So I feel like there's an opportunity to open up trade, like to to increase competition with to increase competition, while you can create jobs and increase the economy. In a more foreign policy wise, you can use these allies to create. You can use these foreign policies to create economic, like how should I say this, alliances where both like regions can like both countries can benefit from one of each other. Like how to say like there's one alliance that I should look at but I forgot. um which so yeah, I feel like these can intertwine, and if you get the right, like how should I say this, the right amount, I feel like you can create a country where there is endless opportunities, where you can easily achieve the American dream, and where you can have, and where any like anything can happen in America if you have the right ingredients, like right amount of foreign policies, like right amount of domestic economic policies as well. I feel like you can create a endless wealth that can effectively impact the society of Americans as a whole.
Okay, Roman, I believe you are, I guess, a conservative or modern day Trump supporter, I think, at least for this
Yeah,
election cycle.
I lean more towards Trump.
Um, obviously, I'm not, obviously, I'm not sure if you've studied what Trump's done in foreign policy, but I mean,
Not really.
he has done remarkable, I guess, he has done memorable events in foreign policy. So my question to you is, Roman,
Hmm.
with Trump's handling of foreign policy in 2018, such as the Rocket Man comments that was made, fire and fury comments that were made against Kim Jong Un, how would Trump be able to mitigate a war differently than how Kamala would be able to?
Well, here the agreements he does with different countries, not just the opposing one itself, and like his blunt honesty and straight to the facts. It poses kind of as a almost like a threat, like saying, like, don't do this, like we will like wipe you out. I haven't studied his like policy too much to really go any further. It's just the fact how it's like, I really
Like, I guess what you're trying to say is look at the last 4 years and compare Joe Biden's 4 years.
exactly.
I guess what you're trying to say. Okay, so
Because America right now is being just absolutely laughed at by all the other countries. Like it's kind of sad.
so I'll ask you a question, and I think we should be getting a new folk because there is someone right now in our hub that is actively voting as we speak, uh, and will be joining us after she's able to complete that. But to Roman's point, I will say I think that while yes, Trump with through threats will be able to, I guess, keep countries under control. I would argue that that would actually put more of a that would be more of a mitigator because what you're doing essentially is you're not creating trust, you're just creating threats.
I
And in
feel
order
like
to
if you create more threats, it will allow the person being certain to empower themselves to do more harm, I believe.
yeah, um but I guess what I will say is, and I know that this doesn't have to do with Kamala Groudon, in
Yeah.
2021 America had what was arguably one of the most disastrous pullouts
Mm-hmm.
in Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, Kamala couldn't have done anything about this. She was the vice president. She's the vice president.
Mm-hmm.
However, what I will say is, I don't think that it would be fair to argue because Kamala herself has said this before that she was the last person to leave uh, that room during the pullout. I would I would say that it's not fair to argue that Trump would have stopped it itself. I wouldn't think that's fair. However, what I will say is I think that had Joe Biden and Kamala perhaps um, considered this pullout a little bit more lengthier, and had they not pulled out immediately, I think that um, the situation we would be in right now would be a lot different. What I'm going to ask you is, do you think that if Kamala was the commander in chief, the pullout in Afghanistan would be handled differently? 30 seconds.
I feel like she wouldn't be able to affect anything because from what I remember, the pullout was signed into I think the pullout was signed from the last administration. Like there was news reports that the Taliban and one of the Trump's cabinet met in Qatar to form a peace agreement or a treaty where by this date the US Army has to pull out. Like something like that. And then there was also reports that the Afghan government couldn't do weren't even seated at the table as well. There was a source. I need to check on that, but
Hmm.
I feel like she wouldn't have I feel like she would made some tweaks, but it would still have resulted in a disastrous the outcome as today. But it will be less chaotic. It will be more like orderly chaos, shall I say? Because I feel like she couldn't do anything once that treaty was signed from the last administration.
Okay.
So yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, Trump, I believe the Trump administration were the people who did sign the peace agreement with the Taliban. Um, I'm going to say that, what I will say is that you do have a really good point. Um, I guess what most people, and I guess what the argument was, I think the argument the conservatives do make is, um, that we shouldn't have ever lost that many troops. 13 American soldiers. That was I believe the most troops killed in active duty since February 2020. Um, I believe, and someone can fact check me on that if I am incorrect. But I think what the argument is for conservatives is $68 billion worth of technology lost, um, and could easily be, and that technology could be easily replicated by China. And again, I think that China is not necessarily an existential threat to America itself physically. I think that they are an existential threat towards the West economically and
Yep, I
strategically.
agree with you.
Um,
Yep.
However, I think what I will say is that while this pullout was disastrous, I am convinced that this pullout could have been 10 times worse had it occurred during the actual heights of the COVID pandemic. Um, Now, you also have to take that into account. There was a global pandemic at this time. During the Trump administration, this was during the beginning of the pandemic, and during the Biden administration, it was at its height of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that I think COVID and outside factors also had an effect on how we pulled out. I'm not going to blame Biden necessarily for uh, the entire pullout. You can't blame Biden for a hurried deal. This was hurried. It had been hurried since what 2020, I believe, 2019. Um, the way we did pull out, unfortunately, was terrible, and we could have handled it a lot better had there not been factors that were outside their control. Um, so Roman, I don't know if you're still
Yes,
there.
definitely.
Okay, then you'll be sticking around. Um,
Yep.
uh, okay, so the question to you is, I guess now we'll be moving on to the economy. Um, During the Biden administration, interest rates were high, inflation were high, has been high. The average cost of groceries in the United States has risen by around 88%. Um, and it's being felt here, uh, and it probably is being felt across the world. My question to you is, what policies that Kamala has proposed already, would help not necessarily stop inflation right now, because that won't happen. That's not possible. But what policies does Kamala have that would um, begin to start dropping those inflation rates, like we've seen in the Biden administration, but perhaps a little bit faster? Because right now, Americans are suffering through what is potentially the worst inflation crisis in quite a while. Uh, and the average medium uh, age for those first time home buyers is 53 right now. Obviously, as we both are Gen Z, obviously the cost of living has been going up ridiculously.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Homes have been going up ridiculously, and it's really hard to afford to buy a home at our age, especially with our wages, especially with American wages still remaining the same. What does Kamala have, and what policies does Kamala have to, I guess, in a way, improve the economy and potentially improve the housing market crisis when it comes to Gen Z? Go ahead, 2 minutes.
Okay, so first off, she has said about affordable housing, where she would propose $40 billion, which I feel like should be more, such as investment to combat rising rent costs and discourage large scale purchases of rental properties. There's another one where she wants to reduce healthcare costs by which is seen by the Insulin Reduction Act, where a lot of the life-saving medical healthcares have reduced to, which were reduced from like astronomical prices, like $1,000 for some tablet, a packet, to like basically $40-$50, which is still kind of high, but still viable. But
Hmm.
at least it is viable. And then there's also her combating corporate greed, such as the price gouging in grocery stores, which I feel like every store has some sort of price gouging policy attached to it. And then there's also the child tax credit, which she has said, which I feel like was 6,000 per eligible family, which is
Yes.
quite good. Like, if you want to start a family, then yeah. Then there's the investment infrastructure and local economies, such as the Build Back Better. There's the other one, the CHIPS Act.
Hmm.
What else? There's another one I forgot. There's also the investment of renewable energy as well to reduce
Carbon
to
emissions.
reduce like yeah electricity prices and to create jobs as well, which is a win-win for areas in the Rust Belt or in the Sun Belt where there's lots of sun and you can use solar power to power pro- like areas of America, which is I want to see in the future.
I do want to get to that point about the housing crisis because I do want to mention that, um, and I don't want to say that your point is wrong. That's not what I'm saying. But I do want to just
Hmm.
point out, and I just do want to get your reaction on it. Um, right now, I think we all know that there is a crisis going on in California when it comes to the real estate market. Homes right now are at an all-time high. People are moving out of the state because they just can't afford taxes. They cannot afford um, the housing prices, and they're all moving to relatively new, cheaper spots. Now, like Texas, like Florida, like North Carolina, like Arizona. Um, Obviously, now with a changing demographic of more left-leaning people moving out of left-leaning states towards more right-leaning and potentially centrist states, how could you argue that? Uh, how could you argue to someone who is pointing all this out? What would you tell them? Like, what would you tell the person who is pointing, the crisis that's going on in California, the crisis that's going on in Illinois and New York? What would you tell them to comfort them?
Hmm. Because the housing crisis has affected a lot of countries, like here in Australia. Like here in my city, it's like 7.9. Like you need like 7.9 times the amount of money to get a house. I feel like it's how should I say this? It's more of there's a supply of materials to build houses right now due to a global chain blockage, such as from the Suez Canal being like very dangerous, and then there's also what else? Yeah, and the fact that there's been and the fact that this changing climate has attributed like to the impact of flow of materials. So how can I feel like we can solve this housing crisis uh by I feel like we can solve this housing crisis by building like social housing, like government funded social housing. I feel like while it's not this city's fault that house prices are high, it's just that there's a lot of space that's been bought up by a lot of renters. Like there's a lot of companies that have been buying up housings. Like I feel there's like one person here in Australia that has 118 rental houses. Like
Ooh,
really, I mean, there's bound to be more in your country. Like
yeah.
there's bound to be like people in your country like like with Airbnbs, like buying up houses with like jacked up prices.
Yeah,
Like,
for sure. I think that's actually really common here, and especially more common in now as of yet here in the states, at least here in Texas. It's been more common amongst more southern cities, such as McAllen, such as Hardenburg, um, southern border cities. A lot of people have started to buy out Airbnbs and start putting them up for sale. In Houston, at least, we haven't seen that much grow. We haven't seen much of that grow, but it's increasingly becoming more noticeable the more south you get and the more closer you get to the border. Obviously, there's a
yeah.
lot of reasons for that, but yeah, I do see what you're getting. We're gonna be taking a quick break. We'll be right back with more um, after this, so stay tuned.
Oh, Louise here.
Hello.
Hello. You voted?
What's up?
You just voted, I guess? Like, you just came
Well,
back from
I
your
filled
place?
out my ballot. I need to cast tomorrow, but yes, I did finish filling it out.
Oh, you're voting. Okay, you're voting them out, and then. Okay.
Yeah, that's it. Is it that?
Can they still hear
No,
us?
it's not. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out why this.
The intermission music. Wait, how many people are watching?
You.
And we are back. Welcome back to what is a election night special voters debate. This will be a series where we pretty much discuss each of our political views. And viewers, you will be given 30 minutes to ask questions for us to answer, or really the people that are talking or discussing to answer. Um, my name is David Vela, here located in Houston, Texas, joined by formerly Roman, but he'll be back soon. Joined by Roman, now joined by Lily, who just voted in the state of California, and of course Groudon. How are we doing?
Good.
Anxious, but yeah, anxious. um, this is really one of those elections I've seen where it's a complete toss-up, and I don't have any idea who's gonna win. Like, I remember the 2020 election. I wasn't old enough to vote, obviously, but I remember it quite clearly. And it was a pretty decent sense that Biden was going to win. It was a pretty decent gut feeling on that. But with this one, I don't even have a gut feeling or like any thought of who's going to win the Electoral College. Personally, I think Kamala Harris is going to win the popular vote just because she has all of the key populous states. She has California, she has New York, she has Massachusetts, like all of those um states. But I Illinois too. But I don't know who's going to win the Electoral College. It is a genuine like I don't even have a gut feeling saying, "Oh, this person might win." It's completely tied in my head.
But do you have a favor of which side do you want to be favor? Like, which side do you feel like feels like it's
Well,
being favored right now?
it looks like it's just ever so slightly in Trump's favor, in my opinion, with the Electoral College, but it all comes down to who wins Pennsylvania and Michigan. Like if you win Pennsylvania and Michigan, you win the election. North Carolina, I foresee that going red for Trump. Georgia's a toss-up. I believe it went red last time. Look,
No,
It went
Georgia
red
went
last.
blue. Georgia
Georgia's
went blue by
blue.
10,000. I think like 30,000 votes or something like that, or 10,000 votes. I just
Ooh.
do want to
Georgia
say,
went.
I do just want to quickly say, if you're watching this video, please subscribe because we'll be going live for and full unbiased and complete coverage on the election tomorrow night. Share this stream out to everybody you know, because we're trying to reach out to a whole populace, a whole area of people who just don't want to watch legacy media or just don't want to watch um, CBS, CNN, Fox, any of that. We're trying to reach out to those folks. And I just
Yeah.
want to quickly pull out some scenarios that we have on the screen for you. So right now, the biggest and the most likely case scenario is that Kamala wins Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Now, the state that has the most likely chance, at least in the Rust Belt, at least out of these three states, for Trump to win would be Wisconsin. Um, right now, as of the polls, Trump would win North Carolina and Georgia, Arizona and Nevada, which would put the number itself for 268 for Trump, 251 for Democrats. This is where Pennsylvania comes in. If Trump wins Pennsylvania, he will win this election 287 to 251. However, if Kamala wins Pennsylvania, it will be the closest election uh, since Al Gore and Bush, which would put her to exactly 270 compared to Trump's 268. So that is why Pennsylvania is um, such a crucial uh, battleground state in this election cycle. Essentially,
And so
if you want to win this election, you have to hope that Pennsylvanians will vote for you. That's the only way you're gonna win this election cycle.
yeah, it's
Okay,
also
I've been
why
looking. Oh, do you want to speak
um
first? Because I'm gonna
yes,
speak
please.
longer.
It's also why both of the candidates have been campaigning so aggressively in Pennsylvania. Both Kamala and Trump have been doing a lot of campaigning in Pennsylvania because it is the most major battleground state in the election so far. Pennsylvania has historically, it's always been kind of a swing state, at least in the most recent of elections in the past few decades. But it's historically leaned more blue. The only time it went red that I can think of is 2016.
Hmm.
However, like the assassination attempt a few months ago in Pennsylvania might swing the vote more to the favor of red, but it's just so hard to tell because there's so many factors. You can't rely on what's happened recently or what's happened in the past. You just have to wait and see what happens with that state, and that's probably what we're going to have to do.
I feel like, to add on to Lily's point, there was a rally in Madison Square Garden where he didn't say anything about Puerto Rico, but that statement of Puerto Rico being garbage did resonate with a lot of Puerto Rican residents living in Pennsylvania. And there's been
Yeah.
a poll that around 64% of Puerto Ricans living in Pennsylvania will vote for Harris. So which will sway Pennsylvania back into, well, slightly back into Harris's column, but it's still a very close race to
I
call.
think it should
It's
be
a
pointed out, and I just do want to quickly point this out. Um, Latinos, just in general, have been turning more conservative throughout each election cycle. Um, and Trump has increasingly been gaining ground in Latinos for the last three election cycles. He has slowly started gaining the black uh, vote. However, Kamala, of course, being a female black president, and also not just because of that, because of the offers that she is offering towards those communities, such as, I think, what were they? Student loan forgiveness.
Yep,
Um,
that.
and they are they. It is increasingly becoming more of pre or more of 2020 numbers for the black vote in terms of the
Hmm.
Latino vote. And part of the reason why Arizona and Nevada are beginning to look like it's going to be more of in more red is because um, for the last three election cycles, Latinos have been increasingly voting red. Now, as to why, um, I'm a Latino myself. I think I'm the only Latino in this voice call, and in this room. So I'm gonna go ahead and probably explain my reasonings into why a Latino would vote for Trump. And the to put it simply, it just for a Latino, it would feel like they're the backbone of America right now, and it feels like as of right now, it's like we're not living into what it used to be. I mean, Latinos on average do work the longest hours compared to most Americans, and they are earning on average much significantly less than um, other racial groups. So I guess through a Latino perspective, it has to do with the economy, but I think it also has to do with the idea that the Democrats. I'm not saying that Kamala Harris is doing this, or that Clinton was doing this, but to me, um, what Democrats have forgotten about is, I mean, you can try to gain the white college liberal, the white college vote, but Latinos were what you were built on, and there's an echo, and Latinos were what you were built on, and when you are slowly beginning to turn more progressive, which is another thing, Latinos do not tend to be progressive. They tend to be socially conservative while being economically progressive, which is true. Um, I myself quite tend to find myself more socially conservative, but quite financially liberal. Um, I think that the Democrat Party and just politics as a whole have abandoned us, Latinos, and maybe it's just how we're feeling. Maybe it's just because this decade has been such a complete turnaround. This decade has been difficult for everybody, but I think especially in Latinos, um, Latinos have seen the most fatalities just in terms of COVID. That hit hard. Um, and for example, when you have a common guy like Donald Trump, come in 2016. I think this is part of the reason why Trump won in 2016. I mean, he's your average political, he's not even he's not even a politician. He's just your average common guy in 2016, and he won that vote because a lot of Latinos were like, I'm tired of these old antics. So I think what we're beginning to see is a Latino, I wouldn't say uprising, but a Latino resistance to not necessarily extreme progressivism, but just wanting to resist the abandonment that we do feel from Democrats and just from politicians as a whole. So I think as a Latino, the reason why you are voting for Trump, if you are voting for Trump and you're a Latino, you're probably going to take into consideration. I mean, look at how it was 4 years ago. I mean, look at how it was when Trump was president. I mean, groceries were low. The grocery prices were low. I could afford a home. Sure, I mean, it was expensive, but it wasn't as expensive as it is right now. I can afford to have children. I can afford to grow a family. I can afford the American dream. And all of a sudden now, it's just hard to do that. Um, and that's part of the reason why Latinos did come to America, because we are still under the impression that the American dream is still um, achievable, but it's getting really hard to do that. Enough yapping from me. Go, somebody take over. And
Um, I think, I think the logic is personally flawed, but not like in the way that most people would think that I would, just calling out that logic. I just think the idea that a single politician or political party has your back at this point is pretty delusional, I guess. Personally, I lean more Democrat, but also personally, I criticize a lot of what the Democratic Party does, and same with the Republican Party, but because I lean more Democrat, that was pretty much a given. Um, I just, I think the idea that supporting a party based on inference instead of actually research might be an iffy thing, and I don't know if that's actually what happens because I'm not Latino. I But as a woman, I'm seeing some of the policies that both sides introduce, and as a woman, I disagree with the policies that both parties introduce. And personally, I think the most important takeaway from this election isn't what policies are thrown around, which candidate wins, which um, party is in control. And I think the most important takeaway from this election is how the citizens react. I mean, we saw with the fallout of the 2020 election, the January 6th riots are the most famous example that come to mind, but there were also numerous other protests from both sides. And there's just not room from either side in this election. I think part of what makes me so interested in politics is seeing what needs to be changed. And the more I research into it, the more change I see needs to take place in our government. And it's not a partisan issue. If one party had all the solutions to a problem, there would not be a two-party system. Um I'm going to go on a tangent right now, but
mhm.
take Donald Trump. I don't like Donald Trump. I don't support Donald Trump. You have to admit that he knows what he's doing with money. And he's a businessman. He's a deal maker. He he can egg on certain elements of foreign policy. Do I agree with his foreign policy? No. Do I for example, I do not agree with Air. Of course he does. And that's part of the appeal to a bunch of voters right now because we are in a pretty difficult state financially. I would know. I live in California, where everything is incredibly expensive. But that voting purely Republican just based on supporting that party, or voting purely Democrat based on supporting that party seems naive to me. And I think in the future we shouldn't have to settle for a candidate just because they're less horrific than the other candidate. I mean, personally, on my ballot, most of the people I voted for are Democrat, but I did vote in a few Republicans on my ballot because it should be a policy issue and an issue of education and knowing what you're talking about instead of just seeing Democrat or Republican and voting for that.
I think to the
Um,
point that you made, sorry, but I think I have to say this to the point you made uh that it's kind of naive to vote based on not doing research. I think with Latinos is that it's not that we're not doing research, it's that we're experiencing these effects. And
yeah,
arguably, I would argue that we're experiencing them more than like most races. Again, I'm going to point back to the argument that we've made and that I made. The argument that I made was Latinos are now, I guess right now, and I think you and I can both agree, Latinos right now are increasingly becoming the backbone of America. They
yes.
are, for the most part, Latinos are working their ass. I apologize for the language, but Latinos are working their asses off building infrastructure, farming, um, producing food and crops, working the hard labor jobs, and they're not getting paid much. So when I hear someone be like, and I'm not trying to attack you personally, this is not an attack on you at all. And if it does sound like that, I apologize. But just hear me out for a second. When I hear someone that says, um, it's kind of naive to vote on someone without research. While I do agree with that, I think the point is being ignored. I think the point is it's not that we're not doing research, it's that we're feeling those impacts more because we're working so much harder. We're missing time, quality time with our family. We're working those dirty jobs. We're working those hard jobs, those hard labor jobs, not getting paid much. And with these increasing prices, I mean, we're going to feel that. We're going to feel guilty ourselves because for most Latinos who are coming to the United States, we have a family to take care of. We want our kids to be the best they can. We want to be the backbone so that our kids can jump. Like we want to crawl so that they can walk. And especially, for me personally, coming from an immigrant myself, um, I came to this country with my parents, and they have worked their damn asses off, and I will always respect that, and I will always um, have that special place in my heart for them because they worked their they worked their hardest for me and for my siblings, and what we're seeing right now in the 4 years, I shouldn't have to come home and hear, people like my parents arguing over what we should pay because things are getting too expensive. So I don't think it's that. I don't think it's the fact that we're not doing things through research. It's the fact that we are suffering, and arguably we're suffering even worse because we are not earning much and we are paying a lot more than where we were. Um, but that's just a tangent. Uh,
Yeah. I mean, I don't really have anything to say to that, but because I'm not Latino, um, I mean, my family also has our fair share of financial struggles that I do not feel like getting into. But I don't I don't know, cuz Trump is a mixed bag. Trump knows what he's doing with money, and Trump also is not a huge fan of immigrants. And so it's just like, I mean, obviously the economic issues is more pressing, so it's understandable where it comes from. Um, I mean, all I can do is spout my personal experience as someone who grew up um, uh, pretty poor for a decent chunk of my life, and also as a woman. And I mean, I didn't vote for Democrat just because of women's issues for me. Uh, I mean, there were multiple factors that went into my ballot. And personally, I didn't want to vote for either. Like, given the choice to vote for someone else who actually has the potential of winning, I would have voted for them, but that's unrealistic because no other party is going to win. But yeah, I don't really have anything to say about Latino issues just because I'm not Latino. I can't really say what I've lived through as a Latino. I can say what I've lived through as a woman and as someone who is lower class for a decent period of my life. Um, and that's all I really have to say about the issue of Latino voters. And it's understandable where they come from. I'm not attacking them. It's just not really something I can tackle, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, and obviously, you know, with these points being made, most of these come from personal experience, and
Yeah.
you just have to understand that these come from personal experiences. And when I'm speaking when it comes to like making my points, we're gonna talk. I mean, I will talk about my personal experiences because I think, you know, research is important too, but you also have to understand where people are coming from. And I think personal experiences can be a lot valuable in politics. They're just not used, uh,
Yeah.
which is a shame because if they were used, um, we would be in a much better political state right now than, or at least I would bet, we would be in a much better political system than we are right now. And
I
yeah,
think also not letting politics interfere with actual relationships and human interaction is crucial. Because I know people who have ended friendships over different political beliefs. And I just think that's not viable as a country. It's not sustainable. I mean, there's a famous quote that says, house divided amongst itself cannot fall. And we are getting increasingly and increasingly separated. I mean, if you look at what's happening in our government, they can barely come to an agreement because there's no bipartisan compromises happening in our government. And that's not effective or sustainable. I mean, both sides need to give up something to come to an agreement for the greater good. And I mean, as a Democrat, like personally, uh, there are some issues that I don't want to give up, but for the greater good of moving forward and for progress, like they can be pushed to the side for now. I mean, personally, I talk a lot about gun control. That's an issue I feel pretty passionate about as a student.
hmm,
And there's just an utter refusal amongst the government to come to an agreement about gun control, and it's slightly infuriating.
yeah, um, yeah, I agree with that.
But it also just comes to the citizen level. Like everyday citizens hating each other or like refusing to associate with each other for political beliefs. Um,
I do want
and
to just quickly
I, f-
say, and just quickly move on. Before you make your point, I just want to quickly say, for those who are watching, you can make your comments. The topic right now is, and we're about to move on to this topic, but um, the topic right now that we're about to move on into before after Lily finishes will be, um, are politics becoming too general, too polarized? And yeah, she's already made it. Like I guess she's already touched on that, but we're about to go deep into that because I think this is an important conversation to have. But yeah, go ahead, finish your statement. Sorry.
I think it's important as a liberal to look at my own party and see what's they're doing wrong. Because I know a lot of liberals who would look at the Democratic Party and they would see nothing wrong with the way that it's being run or the way that things are going. And I know for a fact, because it's much easier to see with the opposite party, that that's what people do with Trump. People blind people blindly support their party or their leader. And that's just not viable at all, as a, a fact-based election system, which delves down to the media, which I probably will get to later because that's also a topic I feel strongly about. But I think the idea of just blindly supporting a candidate purely based on party and not policy is part of what's wrong with our political climate and why everyone is so divided and angry about this election. I'm anxious about this election, but I'm not angry. Um, And so it just brings up something that I've noticed more and more as I mature more, both like politically and just as a person, that people are so unwilling to like overcome their differences when it comes to something like that. And I think uh l- liberals refusing to associate with conservatives for their beliefs is just as bad as the other way around, even though a lot of people in my party don't think so. It's just it just dwells down to a larger problem of political polarization that that removes the united from the United States of America, and it's it's just a problem that I've noticed so much and increasingly more and more with the 2020 and 2024 elections. And I feel like it has to be addressed before we go too far away from each other.
Yeah. Um, I'll make my opening statements regarding this. Um, I think that what we're beginning to witness, and I'll say this right now, if we're continuing to go down the path that we've been going into, I think that this election cycle, uh, that it won't be long until a presidential candidate, whether that's Trump or whether that's a future candidate, whether that's in the Republican or in the Democrat Party in the future, it won't be long until we'll see either an attempted assassination attempt or an assassination attempt. Politics right now is at a point where we're so divided that we are willing to take human lives, um, because we disagree in politics. And it's just a disgrace because, we were built under the founding principles of opinion and debate. And we should stick into those principles of debate and discussion. And what
Absolutely.
and what we're beginning to see right now is what we're beginning to see right now is, like, for example, what we've seen, for example, on TikTok. If you're on TikTok, I'm a Gen Z person. I'm gonna mention TikTok, of course. But if you go on TikTok and you look up at people like, I don't know, Harry Sisson, for example. Uh, I have nothing personal against that guy, but when you're debating someone, like for example, you debate someone, right? Um, and they bring up a good point, you can't dodge that question, or just that. Either they dodge the question, or I'm just saying, not just Harrison because he's a liberal, but most TikTok debaters, they dodge questions and they use personal attacks. And I think that's one of the biggest disgraces in American politics. You should not be divided under the right to have a different opinion. Um,
Mhm.
we were built under the principles, and that's what makes America amazing. America is great because you have the First Amendment right to disagree and to discuss
Yeah.
those disagreements. And what we're beginning to see, not just in the modern day, not just in modern day politics, but with the younger generations especially. And this has more to do with a topic I will touch later on. Um, but this has to do, but we're beginning to see this trend towards self-isolationalism and just this willing to not be able to concede, the willingness to be like, no, you're wrong, and every single good point that you're make, I'm gonna dodge, and I'm gonna attack you personally. Like, for example, think of 2016, 2015 SJWs. I think, Lily, you and I can agree that that was a fun time to be alive.
Yeah,
SJWs were a really fun time.
but
2016, 2015. Um,
that's but also, like, that kind of advocacy I feel like doesn't work. Like, obvious it didn't really result in much social progress. In fact, I feel like it resulted in more neutral people going against the cause that they were fighting for, and that's just not really a way to go about social progress, and I'm saying this as someone who is LGBT.
mhm.
Um, that's not how you fight.
I do just want to quickly point out. I need y'all's opinion. Chat. I need you guys' opinion. Um, so honestly, obviously, we will not have the graphics like CBS or NBC or CNN does for like their debates and their coverage. But are we doing a good job right now? And would you be willing to tune into our actual live election coverage, which will be tomorrow?
You
Just answer
said
that in the question.
you
Uh,
said tunes in British. Would you be willing to tune in?
okay. Um, just let me know
Um,
in the live chat. But going back to that point, I think America is at a position where the founding, like the found again. I think this is where most Americans, they don't realize this, but the founding fathers did warn us about this.
mhm.
Um, do
It
not
was in
create political parties.
it
Um,
was in George Washington's closing speech before
yeah,
he left.
do not create political parties, something like that. Do not create long-term alliances. And what have we done? We've done the exact opposite.
Mhm.
Um, and I think, while I disagree with the idea that political parties are a bad thing as a whole, um, because sometimes you need to have political parties just in politics.
Yes, I agree.
I think that the founding fathers were scared about the idea that we're just too weak, and they weren't expecting America to become the greatest country in the world, for sure.
Yeah.
But
I mean, say what you want about America, the United States, the country, but it is the leading superpower as a country.
Yes.
Like militarily, economically. Like, I
I
mean,
mean,
I wouldn't say it's the greatest country in the world as in quality of life, but as far as military strength and economy goes, yes.
see, I think
And
I think I
there's
disagree
been
with
report.
that. And again, this is through my personal experience and through Latino experience, just through an immigrant experience. I disagree with that. I think that this country is the greatest country in the world, and maybe because I've been fed this persona, uh, that
The American dream.
the American dream, all of that. I think that's a persona, and I would understand that that's the bias I have. But I think the fact that for first of all, in some countries you don't even have the right to, you don't even have the freedom of the press, freedom of speech. Um, I think in many ways America is the greatest country in the world, and I think this is through the. Oh, sorry. I think this is through the idea, like for example, um, you know, this is gonna be a sad story, but it's gonna get sad. But where I came from, uh, where I come from, you know, my country is in a very terrible state, and that country is Colombia, by the way. But our country's in a very my country's in a very terrible state. You know, um, drugs, shootings, just random shootings as well. Uh, you know, the poverty rates being terrible, the wages being horrible, um, corruption within the government. It sucks. And when you come to the United States, you're given a whole new perspective of like, hey, you're in America, you don't have to worry about that. And
You're welcome.
I think as an immigrant, I owe a lot to the United States and Americans as a whole, because I still believe, and people can disagree with me. I think people can disagree, and everybody has the right to that. But I think just on the pure basis alone that you have a right to disagree, that basis alone makes this country the greatest country in the world. On the
Yeah,
basis
I
that
agree
you
with that.
can disagree and you can debate and you can explain your ideas in a way where you won't be killed or sent to prison for that, where the government isn't influenced under a cartel or a regime. Um, and that's what makes, I think, for me, America the greatest country in the world. I mean, the education is amazing here. Obviously, not the best in the world, but it's purely consistent. It's better than what we had. Um,
Yeah, because from what I see, I feel like America is a great country. Can it be better?
yeah, for
Definitely.
sure. And I'm
I
not
don't think
denying
there is
that.
a such thing as a perfect country.
I'm not denying that America has its flaws. Uh, and again, I'm just talking through the pure basis of my experience, through my bias. Um,
I mean, my experience as an American has been very different from David's. I mean, first, I'm a white American, so that plays definitely some part. I was born here, but also just having the system repeatedly fail me has had me kind of lose, I guess, hope. Not hope, but like trust in the systems in place here. And then I look at the systems in other like Scandinavian countries and I'm like, oh, they actually have some elements together. And I'm not saying they're perfect or even that they're better, but the systems that they have in place that are effective, we do not really have in place, and we're not that effective, at least in my experience growing up.
Because here in Australia, my parents fled the Vietnam War. My
Mm-hmm.
dad was one of the boat people who fled Vietnam by boat and arrived in Malaysia before he was given asylum to live in Australia. Whereas my mum flew to America under seeking asylum as well. Both had different both had different lives. My mum worked as an accountant in San Francisco. My dad was studying for medicine in Melbourne. And to see how their lives changed and when they first met, like here in Australia, it shows that your dreams are possible if you live to if you have the ability to live if you have the ability to think like to how should I say this if you stick together and if you have a will you have a way. That's that sort of method like um
Before we move on, can I, or before we continue, can I address one thing that someone in the chat said?
Mm-hmm.
oh, yeah,
Uh,
sure.
one thing I'd like to say, people do complain about polarization, but a lot of partisans on both sides would still never consider voting for someone on the other side. And I do think that's true, and I'm hoping that does change because people should vote on policy and not party. Um, I mean, I've said this several times. I'm a Democrat, but most of my ballot is filled out Democrat, but I do have one Republican that I voted in or that I filled in on my ballot, and that was just purely based on his policy. His policies were just better than the Democratic candidate that were on the ballot. So I think that's how people should go about voting. Just
Yeah.
look at their platform. They have it online if they actually most of the time they have it online on a good website, unless they're like actually ancient and their marketing team is also ancient, in which it might be harder to find.
Yep.
Bob Devine. Uh,
Yeah.
and just
Just to
read your
answer your
cards
question. Sorry.
with an
Just to
open
answer your
mind.
question. I just want to clarify who is who. So the moderator, and also apparently now a debater, or just a person in the conversation. I'm David Vela. And Groudon, can you speak for me? Or just say something real
Hi.
quick? Yeah. So Groudon, that's Groudon, and Lily is obviously you know, Lily. Lily is the
The
other
one.
one who's speaking. The woman. Yeah. That sounds horrible to say. Um,
I mean, there's only
I
three of
know.
us.
yeah.
Um,
Go ahead. Sorry, I just had to clarify that because it was in the question.
yeah. Um, but yeah, I did vote for a Republican candidate on my ballot. Now, only at the state level, but I did vote for a Republican candidate on my ballot just because I liked his policies better. And that's something that I hope people do in the future. Just like with any election, read their policies, read their platform, see what they're all about, and don't actually like listen to what they put on TV because that's just a marketed version of themselves. See what they see what's on their uh see what's on their platform, but also look at their tenure and past positions. What have they done? Because they can lie all they want on their platform, but they cannot lie on what they've done in the past because that will always be easy to see. So if you're voting, please stay informed. know who you're voting for, know their belief systems and what they actually will do. Because no matter which party you decide to vote for, you should be educated on what they're going to do if they're going to be in office. And that goes for any election ever. Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Independent, um, Joe Exotic, just anything.
Bro.
Joe Exotic.
Joe Exotic, Kanye West, just know their platform.
Oh yeah, Kanye did have a platform, but it was like
He
very
did have a
hashes.
platform. It was
He
very
did have
interesting.
he did have some sort of
I think he
platform
gained like
when he ran.
what? He had like 500,000 votes in 2020 or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, he had
How?
something. He
Out
had
of
something
like
like that.
Yo,
360 million.
what a waste of a vote. I would like to see Kanye as president. I would like to see how that would turn out. I feel like that would be funny.
It would be funny, but it'd also be horrible.
I
Yeah.
feel like he would take us
Have
to
we
war.
discussed on the other candidates that are running or no?
Yes. Next topic, which will be, um,
Hold on,
let me write
wait.
this headline down really quick. It's not even a headline; it's just a topic. Um,
For the Libertarian Party, Chase Oliver with Vice President nominee Mike Termat. For the what's the GRN? Hold up, let me see.
Green Party, Jill Stein, that
Green.
lady.
Oh, it's just I thought it was green, but I felt like GRN was too complicated of an acronym for just the word green.
And Green
That would
Party,
be Jill Stein.
Jill Stein, that woman.
I
Yeah,
find it disappointing that Americans take ordering McDonald's more seriously than presidential candidates.
Because
dude,
it's society.
I spent 2 days filling out my ballot, researching all of these propositions, researching these candidates, to know who I was voting for. And I mean, it's time consuming, but uh, I mean that's what you have to do.
Yeah.
To know who you're voting for, because during a debate, I mean, I was watching the debates, I would know they were kind of just spouting lies the whole time and just refuting each other's claims, but with no evidence and they were just lying about each other and basically just pointing at the finger at each other without actually talking too much policy or bringing up statistical fact. I know
Oh,
people
Lily,
don't
for
do
the
Oh my god, I
proposition.
just did a horrible mistake on the headline.
Damn.
how dare
Should
you,
would
David?
we, bro?
Should have, could have, would have. I'll get to the propositions in a second. But
Yep.
I mean, personally, I had to go out and fact check all their claims, which is time consuming, but I wanted to know what the actual truth was instead of what Donald Trump or Kamala Harris was just spouting at me. And I mean, the moderators are there to do that. And as a Democrat, I have to say the moderators were biased towards Kamala. They preferred Kamala over Trump, which, I mean, I prefer Kamala over Trump, but if I were moderating a debate, I would check them both because the American people deserve to know the facts instead of jumping through hoops and rings to find the facts. Um, and that also brings the point of the media
Yeah, hold
across
on.
in
Yeah,
which
hold
the
on. Let me just write that because that's gonna be a big talking point. Is
I
legacy media?
I
Because
would
we would consider
consider
this
other
legacy
parties.
media, right? Or
Legacy
I'll
means
get to
are
the
those who would have
like
been
yes. I would consider
like
voting
CBS
for other
News,
parties that are also
NBC, MSNBC, all those people. Those are legacy media, right?
yeah,
yeah,
Fox.
CBS,
Yeah.
NBC, Fox News, Newsmax, stuff like that. Um,
I don't think Newsmax starting to become legacy, but not yet. So is
It's
Newsnation
isn't
as well.
Newsmax just Fox News on steroids?
Newsmax is just basically yeah it is it's just basically I'll try to say this and then that
I mean,
yeah
the problem with third-party candidates in America is that um maybe I'm thinking of a different one. Hold up.
because
The
when I see some of
problem
these third parties have been
well, they
2016
also
was
suck.
big time for third party candidates.
Yeah.
yeah
but they don't really have a chance. Like a vote for them is basically just throwing out your vote at this point. I don't know if none of them can
I mean,
win. I don't know if it's going to change in the future.
you could,
No.
And I kind of hope it does, but I don't foresee it happening because it hasn't
Yeah.
happened in the
The
past
two-party system here in America has been a dominant force.
but
There is n-
since the Civil War.
I mean, if you really
th-
think about it, the only reason why Trump won in 2016 was because of the big turnout in like liberal voters that were voting third party. So
yes, it was.
technically, if you do vote third party and you get mass droves of those voting third party, you could really cause another party to win just because that disproportional drive would be insane. In the UK, we saw that with Reform, with the Reform UK party. The Conservatives could have won, could have held that third term, or however long they were holding that parliament for. But because the Conservative Party was in shambles, and the rise of Nigel Farage um, and Reform UK happened, you saw Labour win because all the Conservative voters didn't know who to vote for. So Liberal Democrats saw a huge rise. Reform UK saw a huge rise in, I guess, proportional votes, but they didn't see many seats because because they didn't win. The Labour vote was unified, while the Conservatives and I guess the Tories were divided. They were separated. So that's pretty funny. It's pretty funny to see. That's why I like the UK politics so much. I like it. I prefer it so much better than American politics.
And to add on to the fact, majority in 2016, the majority of these voters were basically, I feel like they were angry that Bernie Sanders lost the nomination process because there was a movement called Bernie or Bust. And then the majority of those disenfranchised Democrat voters decided to vote for Jill Stein because, as a protest vote, in some sort of way.
I,
Hence the reason why she lost Michigan and all those Rust Belt states.
I think it was because there was alleged results, or there was, it wasn't even alleged. It was confirmed that there was that the DNC pretty much rigged the primaries for Hillary Clinton instead of Bernie Sanders, which I think Bernie Sanders would have been a good candidate.
Yeah,
Um,
Bernie Sanders had progressive ideas. I do like his ideas.
I felt like he was more centrist. Just he was more. I wouldn't
People
say.
were pulling out the socialism card with him. I remember that
Yeah,
pretty
they were
He,
pulling out the
I don't think. I
socialism.
don't think he was super like extreme. What'd you call him? Like I
He
don't think he
wasn't.
was liberal. He was just more um left leaning, progressive economically for sure, but socially he was left leaning. I don't think. I don't like. I don't think.
Yeah,
I think Republicans did him a dishonesty, just throwing stuff out of their.
It was
yeah,
they basically just like red scared everyone into
yeah.
his
They
candidacy.
put a McCarthyism on my bro Bernie.
They threw the socialism card around for him.
Yep.
But I actually do want to talk about legacy media because it's just it's something that I feel quite passionate about. I mean, I personally want to go into journalism, as well as teaching history and English. Um, so I mean, those are all pretty different, but journalism is something I'm pretty passionate about. Which leads to the idea that journalism corporations they're corporations at this point, and they seek to serve a certain viewer base. Fox News obviously caters to more conservative, Trump supporting people, and that's where they get their money from. CNN, NBC, they serve more towards the liberals. And it gets to the point of it's no longer about spreading facts or informing the public, it's about swaying the public. And that's not what journalism or media or news media should be. It is about factual reporting of current events. That is what news media is,
I think.
and not
Yeah, I'm
try
gonna.
to villainize
So
someone in the sky.
No, no, no. Go ahead. Sorry, I was just making comments for myself. Just taking in notes.
Okay.
Like, yeah. Oh, you're done?
Well, that's basically my point. American media minus Associated Press and Reuters at this point is more about swaying the public and demonizing a party, uh, and less about actual spreading of fact. And it's a problem on both sides. Both liberal media and conservative
Conservative
media
media.
does that. And it's how you pull apart a country just for some extra cash for their viewer base.
You know, I think I find it crazy. I'm gonna point to CBS, because obviously I love CBS. Their composers, like the composer at CBS. For me personally, I like my personal experience with CBS has been amazing. Their executives are really nice. The composers there are really kind. They were willing to let us borrow music for them for this election cycle. Um, so I mean, I have all respects to CBS, but I think like look back to CBS. Like I want you to go back to 1990 CBS with us. What's his name? Um, Dan Rather. CBS Evening News with Dan Rather, 1991, between 1990 and 2001. Uh, then go to Scott Pelley, 20 from 20 I think 2011 to 2016. Then look at Jeff Glor, and then the current host. So here's my so let me give you a little bit of history. CBS was never progressive until like Katie Couric came on. Katie Couric, who is also before Nora O'Donnell, was one of the only female hosts of the CBS Evening News. Now, at the time, was Katie Couric was one of the most left-leaning progressive hosts, and that's why she didn't have that many years at CBS. So when Scott Pelley takes over for CBS, um, for Katie Couric, you know, Scott Pelley is one of the most respectable journalists, I think, not just in CBS but the market in general. But the later end years of his reign, and he left because of this problem too that the legacy media does have, and it's that internal division between and tension between specific coworkers. I am 100% convinced that there is conservatives working at CBS, but they're just too afraid to open out because then they will get canceled or, you know, cut out. My proof and my evidence for this: Jeff Glor. Jeff Glor took over Scott Pelley for 2 years. Now, unlike Scott Pelley and unlike the host that we're about to talk about, Jeff Glor was probably one of the most centrist and arguably one of the more conservative hosts at CBS Evening News, and actually was focused on reporting the facts. And what happened with him was it was never speculated why he left CBS Evening News, um, apart from the fact that CBS Evening News had lower ratings. Obviously, just that's one part. But what happened was, and this is from rumors, from inside the source, inside the company, but because he was one of the more conservative leaning and centrist leaning hosts, the executives didn't like that very much. So in 2018, they gave him an ultimatum: either you're gonna start being more left leaning with these news stories, or we're just gonna cut you out. And obviously, they cut him out. The person that they replaced him with, Nora O'Donnell, is one of the worst hosts that CBS Evening News has ever had. And not because she's a woman, not even because of that at all. Nora O'Donnell is the most biased evening news host since Katie Couric. Katie Couric and Nora O'Donnell needed to go. And with Nora O'Donnell, she leaves tomorrow. Her reign at the CBS Evening News desk is over. She leaves tomorrow, and taking over that spot will be John Dickerson, very respectable journalist, and um, Major Garrett, also a very respectable journalist. But what I'm trying to get at is CBS used to be so factual with their reporting. And you might recall CBS, Dan Rather, because the most popular, if you've ever done research on 9/11, the most popular news reports from CBS came from Dan Rather. Dan Rather himself was arguably the most popular evening news host um, in America at the time. So I think this is one of the consequences of executives being left leaning and appealing to the DNC. People are leaving and people are getting kicked out because they're not willing to stand up and they're not willing to just fall down to liberal ideology. So, holy, I've talked for what, 5 minutes straight? It's just someone take
Yeah,
over.
you've been ranting a lot on CPS. Not gonna lie.
I mean, it's just. I mean, yes, it's a very obvious example right there, and I think it's important to note that it's a problem on both sides of the aisle as far as legacy media goes. Like, I'm sorry, but a vast majority of the news sources right now are reporting with bias towards liberal or conservative. I mean, conservative, you have like Fox News, Newsmax, stuff like that. Liberal, you have uh, NBC, CNN, CBS more. It's just
I don't think
like
CNN will. I don't think you can count CNN as a liberal media anymore. They've
CNN
been.
is biased, but not to the point that NBC is.
Yeah, but CNN has
It.
been trending more right.
Slowly, surely,
In
yeah.
I
I
think.
began to notice that.
I think that's a good thing as long as they don't like start like spreading. I think as if they go more centrist, I think that's a good thing.
Speaking of which,
Um,
our next question will be, which legacy media is the most biased? CNN, CBS, Fox, NBC, or MSNBC?
that's
Fox
hard for me
is
to
Fox is
gauge.
very biased. I'm gonna have
Fox
to
is
leave.
very biased, but it's also blaringly obvious for me to see as a liberal.
Mm-hmm.
Like whereas I might be more blind to it towards more liberal bias news sources, and I try to keep an eye out because I don't want to get my news source from what is basically an opinion podcast at this point. I
Yeah.
would like to, I would like to lean
Daily
more
Wire.
towards yeah,
Okay.
I would like to lean more towards a factually based news source, which is why, as far as American news sources go, I pretty much use Reuters and Associated Press. And if I do use biased media, I'll cross reference it with another biased media leaning in the opposite direction.
I'm gonna take
But
my.
most of
Sorry, go ahead. I thought you were finished. Sorry.
the problem with the biased media is that most Americans aren't out here doing that. So they just take what they get at face value, which leads to like not a lot of education on what they're actually voting for. They just get all
Mm.
riled up about issues that they can't
Don't
even
understand.
really believe at this point.
Or
Alright.
issues that they actually don't understand because it's been blown out of proportion.
Hey, this has been a really
I-
good conversation. Not gonna lie. I've really enjoyed it.
It's an issue that I feel very passionately about and could talk about all day.
Yeah, me too. I think that's what we're gonna be doing tomorrow. We're gonna keep going on. I'm gonna take my shots and say that the most, at least as of now, the most left-leaning media or at least the rise of the most left-leaning biases. Hold on, let me rephrase that. My English is terrible. Like my grammar is terrible, and I apologize for that. Um, the trendiest. Okay, so the news source that's been trending the left the most, in my opinion, is a tie between ABC and CBS. Um, and I can't believe I forgot ABC.
Oh
ABC
yeah,
and their disgraceful moderators. And I'm not even a conservative. I'm not even trying to defend Trump. Trump is a yapper, and he just talks out of his ass. But the moderators at ABC News, holy crap, they are like they were horrible,
I called
horrible.
that. I called that out. Earlier I said that the moderators were of both debates were leaning more towards Kamala's favor, and that's not okay for a debate. The Americans should be able to hear this. They should be able to hear the standpoints of the candidates, which they have. We've heard plenty of standpoints from both candidates. I'm a little tired of hearing standpoints from both candidates, I'm going to be honest. But they also have the right to know the facts, which is something that we are severely lacking in this election. People knowing the facts without any media bias or without Trump's personal opinion on Kamala's policies or Kamala's personal opinion about Trump's policies or Kamala's opinion on Kamala's policies. They have the right to know the facts without those blindfolds and without those like veils.
Yeah. Um.
I
Although
cut you
I
off.
will
I'm so
say
sorry.
with I will say with the vice presidential debate, I don't think it was as bad.
Well, also
Um.
the vice presidential debate, both candidates were treating each other relatively humanely
Really
compared to
good.
what we've seen.
Like
Like
that.
both of them were finding common ground to actually discuss on, and that was something I really appreciated
That's
on both
Midwestern
JD Vance
love.
and Wall's part.
That's that's I mean JD Vance from Ohio, Tim Walz from Minnesota. That's Midwestern for you. Um,
Yeah,
but I mean it really does put it. The scariest thing to hear is that after debate, people are shocked at the fact that candidates treated each other professionally. That is the scariest thing. And if you have ever heard that, you should be scared. If
yeah,
someone goes to you and is like, "Have you seen that debate? I've never seen candidates act like that on a debate stage." You should be worried about this country. Um,
that I said that. I was like, wow, I haven't seen a debate like that in a long time. And then I was like, oh wow, that's depressing.
let me just new polls have came out. New Twitter polls have came out, so I'm not take these with a grain of salt. New so potential uh hold on, let me speak. Potential electoral numbers now came in. So Donald Trump would take Arizona. I'll leave Nevada blank. Georgia, I'll leave blank. North Carolina would lean to the leaning um, Republican. Uh, Tim Walz would take Minnesota. Well, Tim Walz. Kamala Harris would take Minnesota, and Michigan would go towards Kamala Harris as well. According to this new poll, Twitter poll, and predictions, uh, Georgia would go tilt red. Wisconsin would go tilt red, which actually would put Trump winning already beyond 272, and Nevada would go likely or leaning red, while Pennsylvania would go tilting blue. This is outlandish, but what this means is, and yes, it is true, there are possible combinations in which Trump can win without Pennsylvania. Um, but the
Mhm.
possibilities of, like, for example, winning Wisconsin, so unbelievably low. I think Kamala was leading there by like 2 points, 3 points, um, something like that. It's still a chance. I mean, it's still possible. I'm not going to deny that, but I mean, I doubt that. Folks, ask your questions, comments, or concerns. Um,
Yeah.
I
I
will be
actually
leaving the
would like.
rest. Sorry, I'm going to leave the last 30 minutes for you guys to ask questions to the panel here, and we'll be discussing those topics. Um, but while that's
Yes,
happening,
eat.
huh?
I said yes, eat. Slay.
So while that's happening, let's just discuss about the topic that is in hand right now, that I totally did not write. Totally did not write 10 minutes ago. Has American division gone too far?
I would.
Or the
I would.
alternative, or the question follow-up question is, if not, do we still have a chance? Or will this division eventually start calming itself down?
I hope so. I really hope so. And I'm trying to do this. I mean, obviously, David, I'm talking to you, even though we have opposing viewpoints, and I'm not attacking you or anything. I feel like uh, we've had a pretty insightful and civil conversation here.
Yeah, for sure.
Despite our opposing viewpoints. I actually want to bring up a personal anecdote I had last week. that really had me think a lot more than really had me thinking. It really left me scratching my little blonde head. Um,
Go ahead.
so my grandmother is from the Midwest Southern area. She's Christian. She's very Christian. She's conservative.
Hmm.
I personally am. I'm from Boston. Moved to California. I'm an LGBTQ liberal. And so my grandmother and we're very close, by the way, but we have very opposing viewpoints based on religion, identity, and politics. And we had a conversation, and I had like kind of hinted more towards like maybe you should ease up to the whole liberal thing and see like what actual policies are to unite America thing, like for a little while with her. And so she sat me down and she was like, "What are your policies?" And so I started listing some of the, or like, what are your core beliefs in politics? And so I started listing some of them off. We disagreed on very few of them, and the ones we did disagree on were very minor. And it left me thinking, it was like all of this division and hatred and blind attacks towards each other. And for what? Because my grandma and I were both shocked. We were like, so we're just not that different. It's just a bunch of rhetoric that gets us to think that we're that different. When in reality, we agreed on most of these issues. And it was just something that I thought was really interesting. Because it's something I hadn't really thought about how similar we are as parties and as Americans. And it's just something that I feel like most people didn't think. I didn't think about it. But I don't know.
I mean, no, just
I just,
I think it's
yeah.
crazy too. Basing it like, you know, what we've just like the last 2 hours that we have been on, well, really hour and 47 minutes that we've been on. Just basing it on the last hour and 47 minutes that I've been on with Groudon, and now like you for the last hour and 15 minutes. Um,
Mhm.
what I will say is, uh, and I've always had this belief in like the back of my head, but I just thought that with this rhetoric, um, it would be impossible to see eye to eye. And come to think about it, with this debate, but with this discussion, just in general, um, I think I would argue that this has been, I think, one of the most compelling, uh, arguably one of the best conversations I've had with someone who's opposing, with two people
Yeah.
that have totally different beliefs than I do. Um,
And also, Groudon and I have different beliefs from each other, despite both being liberal. It's very interesting.
I think,
Yeah.
for me, and I've done the 12 axis quiz and all the political quiz I can take. I'm more of a uh, right leaning. Well, you can't be a centrist and also say you're right leaning. Let me rephrase. I am a centrist leaning to the right and a libertarian when it comes to the economy. Socially, as a Christian, I still have progressive values as a Christian. Um, I don't necessarily agree with conservative viewpoints. Like, for example, I think the whole argument that, oh, the Bible says this, the Bible says that, I think that argument is stupid because there's no real basis on it. And I don't think, in my opinion,
And also,
I don't think God would want to
this
be
is
the
a person in the
the
state.
proof of burden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the reason why I hate about putting religion into politics, because it just dilutes your views on how things should be solved. Like,
And it was written in the not in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights, in the First Amendment, to not prefer or neglect any religion. I don't think that's the exact wording, but it's don't prefer a religion, don't make laws based off of a religion, don't prohibit a religion. And so the idea that we're making morals and social laws based off of religion goes against the fundamentals of what our forefathers did when creating this country.
Yeah. And again, I honestly, I'm gonna say this. I'm glad you guys did come along. for this this live stream, and I think the chat can agree that we've had a. I think it's been really great of a conversation that we've had. Um, I think we can all agree with that, just in general. But it's been
Yeah.
quite an amazing discussion to have. Um, and before we end off this stream with closing statements, one more topic just want to talk about. Um, why do we think that rhetoric, like what we just mentioned, has been taken to this extreme? And I'm going to start off with Lily, and then Groudon, and then I will provide my insights, unless you guys pretty much took the words out of my mouth, which I will then say,
Uh,
you took the words out of my mouth.
It's all about support. I mean, well, there's multiple elements because there's multiple elements leading to the division in question. As far as political rhetoric goes, Republicans want you to vote Republicans, Democrats want you to vote Democrat. Democrats will want you to keep voting Democrat. It's how they stay in power. So as long as they keep you voting Democrat, as long as they're going to try to keep you voting Democrat and Republicans are going to try to keep you voting Republicans no matter what. I think it's an issue of keeping them in power. And it's kind of how it goes with all politics. Now, the reason why it's gotten so bad in part is with the media, and I think it's less of a depending on who they want in power thing, and more of a catering to a certain catering to a certain audience makes them money thing, which is even more depraved. And that's my personal opinion on why it's gotten so divided. A combination between political rhetoric between politicians. I mean, in some cases, hinting at supporting violence towards an opposing party, as opposed, and then the media trying to manipulate fact for viewership money. That's what I think. This extreme rhetoric has come down to.
Yep,
Okay.
Groudon, go ahead.
On my part, I feel like there's a few factors that led to these rhetorics being taken. First off, there is as you said, the polarization of media, as both conservative and liberal media
Yeah,
may highlight or distort these statements by candidates to fit their own narratives, such as in Fox News, like Kama's been labeled as a socialist, uh, like like how should I say this without being like not putting racial terms, like using like the word DEI just to like make everyone just to like piss everyone off, whereas liberal media's like MSNBC, CNN, NBC basically shows like use Donald Trump to portray him as a more of a businessman uh with like more businessman, more extreme against people who don't follow his views and all stuff like that. The other factor that goes into this rhetoric is also the social media, because social
yeah,
media in this year's politics has been running rampant with, Elon Musk, that dude, using a super PAC which was questionable things with questionable
yeah.
methods,
Twitter promotes
and
a lot of conservative stuff to me.
yeah, it has promoted a lot of conservative stuff after Elon bought Twitter. Like he has let Twitter go into a cesspool of conservative stuff. Like you can put like I don't know. I saw a tweet with like these young men voting for Harris, and then some conservative Twitter users saying that you are my concubine, something like that, which is quite weird and disgusting. This The other one is also deliberate campaign strategies, like the Trump campaign, like portrays Harris as a border czar. Not border czar, like like
Mm,
Biden's pet, like socialist, communist. They have also went on after her for her race, her gender,
Yeah.
the way she laughs, like it has gone full sexist against Kamala Harris, which basically denigrates her to they legit try to denigrate her to like a second class citizen. Whereas on the other side, the Democrats portray Trump as more of a fascist, more of an unstable guy, weird, very extreme on policies, like
They
the
used
end of the world is
Donald
coming
Trump.
and stuff like that.
They used Donald Trump's shortcomings to demonize an entire political party.
And I
Yeah.
think with that, and I'm not trying to say that that's a double standard, but think I think I would argue that the rhetoric that the left is using with Trump is a lot more dangerous, because then what you get is people who will take that literally and will try to kill the man, because they're under the impression that if this guy gets into the office, he's going to become the next Hitler, going to become the next dictator.
Yeah.
And while with Kamala, I completely disagree with what uh, conservatives have been doing. Painting Kamala with a bad image, I think that is a terrible way of campaigning. Um, but I mean, I think both parties have made mistakes, and I personally believe that there's hope. Um, I personally believe that America can reunite and vote without having to worry about each other's careers, or um, without worrying about whether or not you're going to get beat on the street for being open about who you voted for. Um, I think eventually we will get to that point. It'll take time. It'll take time, and I think what we need to start introducing is young people into politics.
Yeah, like introduce term limits.
Hello.
Like Senate is like okay, yeah, you should put term
I'm
limits
eight.
on the Senate.
Yeah, I'm
Congress,
18
yeah,
years
term
old.
limits
I'm
as
starting
well.
to be like politically active. I think we need more people in my generation, in my age group, to start being more active. And your point
Yeah,
about hope is, I think as long as you have hope and continue to share hope with other Americans and other people and with the world, I think as long as there's hope, there's a way that we can get better as a country.
All right, and we'll be taking a quick 3-minute break, um, just so then so then we can start preparing our closing statements, and then we'll end the stream. And we'll be back. Well, before we end the stream, we'll make some announcements. But we'll be back after this. Stand by. And we're back. We're back with our closing statements. And we're going to start off that. Also, I hope you guys are enjoying the music. We're going to start off with Lily, your closing statements, then Groudon, and then I will end it. And then we'll have announcements, and then we'll end it off with our classic CBS. Of course, CBS being super kind with us, offering our themes. The composers offering themes for us. We'll end it with the closing theme. Lily, go ahead with your closing statement.
Okay, we really said ladies first. My closing statement is a message I would like to say to all of you, no matter what party. Find someone with a different political view as you. Find someone and sit down with them, get some coffee, have a conversation. Don't let yourself go into an argument. Don't let yourself get into a disagreement. Just talk. Because I have found in my maturation process that you can learn so much from an opposing viewpoint if you just listen and actually hear it out. And you can gain such a broader worldview if you actually just listen to the other side. And for me, that is as a liberal actually having discussions with a conservative. I've learned so much when I actually opened my mind to hearing them out. And it's just, I think it's part of what can help with bringing us together as Americans. Just listening to each other, not from a place of aggression or a place of hatred, just from a place of interest, and from the sense that in the end, those of us who are voting, we're all Americans and we all want what's best for our country. I don't think anyone is out here voting thinking that they want to make our country worse. We have a common goal and we are common people. And so we shouldn't let something so trivial as force-fed media lies tear us apart as people, because that's not what our country is about. Our country was fundamentally built on discourse and debate and compromises and agreements. And I feel like that's what we as a country need to understand and go back to in order to move forward and be a better nation. Thank you.
All right, Groudon, you're up.
Okay. So, election day is coming up soon. Americans have a choice
Tomorrow.
to make. Yeah, well, tomorrow. both major candidates have presented competing visions for each country. One grounded in continuity, and another and a commitment to addressing social inequalities, and the other promising a return to traditional values and focusing on economic growth and national security, from what I'm seeing right now.
Yes.
However, these candidates have put different solutions to inflation, rising costs and housing crisis, and they have very diverging views on how to handle foreign policy challenges and to strengthen America's place in the global community. However, no matter the outcome from what I see, the election has underscored a very, very important thing called participation and civic responsibility.
Yes.
America depends on the voices of the people, and now more than ever. And it is fundamental for these voices to be heard and be respected. As Americans cast their votes tomorrow, I feel there's still hope in the election process, and it will be a test of how America's democracy have been resilient to how America's democracy still remains strong and still unites the nation as a whole. So yeah.
All right.
8,
I am
etc.
going to end it off with, I think, a very important note. No matter the outcome of the results, whether Trump wins or Kamala wins, if you're a Republican, hug a Democrat friend, go to a Democrat and hug them. If you are a Democrat, hug a Republican friend, because in the end, we're all Americans. If you are eligible to vote, please vote. Please exercise your amendments. Please exercise your rights to vote. Your voice should always be heard. And no matter what the end result is, you should be proud of living in what I would call the most resilient democracy in the world. We've withstood challenges in the past, and we still continue to withstand challenges in the present, and we will continue to withstand challenges in the future. I think that as Americans, every voice matters, and that in the end, no matter the results, we all have a common goal to make this country better. Given, of course, different views on how we should do it, we all have an end goal. So we should accept it. We should come with open arms and accept each candidate as who they are. This has been a Disaster Central special report. Some announcements before we go. Let me just put up the music. Some announcements before we go. Tomorrow we'll have all-night election night coverage from here in Houston to potentially Los Angeles, Australia, everywhere where we can get people to come in. We will have coverage all night. We will have coverage in the morning, and stay tuned for actual weather events, actual disasters. This has been a Disaster Central special report. My name is David Vela, reporting here in Houston, Texas, joined by Lily and Groudon from respectively Australia and San Diego. Thank you two for being here. Thank you guys for watching the stream, and we'll see you soon. Good night.
Good night.
See you.